one of the main issues with the intersex community is surgery that we haven't consented to. So what should have been a removal of my uterus turned into a whole lot of other things that I hadn't consented to.
Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. We get curious about all things gender, sex and sexuality, as well as relationships, feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. If you like what we do and want to make a contribution, you can become a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender or buy us a coffee. Links are on the website. Now join us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I am a cis queer woman and my pronouns are she and her. In this episode, I have a conversation with LOR. LOR uses he and she pronouns. He is non-binary and intersex, assigned female at birth but genetically male, and she is figuring things out when it comes to gender identities, currently working with the labels demiboy and bigender. Find out what that means to LOR in this episode. In addition to the aforementioned labels, LOR also talks about identifying as trans. She has since asked me to omit this label from the title. In LOR's words, I've since been reflecting on this as I don't believe I should bend to societal pressure to label myself as trans when I am already both. I can't transition into what I genetically and biologically am, if that makes sense. Just goes to show we are all very much a work in progress. In fact, LOR has made some very interesting discoveries about himself since we recorded, so a follow-up episode is definitely on the horizon. We also talk about hormone therapy, the vagueness of consent when it comes to medical procedures and the lack of knowledge about intersex variations in the medical profession, reclaiming body autonomy, the wonder that is fetal development, the difference between sex, gender identity and sexual orientation, and why doing identity work is a good idea. At one point, I mentioned the term sapphic and I was unsure of its meaning. I've since looked it up on the LGBTA wiki and it says that sapphic refers to a woman or woman-aligned person who is attracted to other women or woman-aligned people. They may or may not be attracted to other genders as well. It was recorded on the 15th of June 2021. Now let's get into the episode. Let's go.
All right, let's do it.
Hello and welcome.
Hello.
Hello. What's your name?
My name is LOR.
Hello, LOR. And what I've been asking is, how do you identify? And sometimes I say, tell me about your gender, but gender doesn't really cover all the options in this episode because, over to you. What labels do you use is maybe a better one.
Because I'm intersex and I'm probably like most of people out there that I'm a little bit different and I'm genetically male and I have a mixed biology. So my physical appearance in many different ways is mixed and differs from what we call the binary understanding of sex. And I identify as trans. And I'm working with gender identities of demiboy and bigender. So I'm kind of figuring those out. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, so you're very much like on your own exploration journey about all that.
Yeah, very much so. And it's a good question actually, because I've always been really comfortable with me and who I am. And I have gone through a journey and I'm very accepting of just who I am and I'm comfortable in my own skin. But my work has really started recently when other people started asking me to explain or to understand where I fit in the labels and the categories that we've created for ourselves. And that's when the work really started, to work out, well, where do I fit in, in all of these different categories. So, it's been interesting.
Yeah. So when did you actually find out that you were intersex?
Not long ago, actually. So I found out the full extent of what my body was doing about almost 5 years ago now. when I was, so just going back 100 years when I was born, I'm not going to reveal my age, but uh,
That's
so when
fair.
yeah, when I was born, I, I was slightly ambiguous when I was born. So I was assigned female at birth, but when I was growing up, and especially going through into my teenage years, I didn't develop the same as everybody else.
Mm.
And at the time, I was at an all girls boarding school. And I struggled because my friends were going through puberty. And of course, nothing was happening with me. You know, my chest
Mm.
was flat, and I just I just didn't feel the same. So I think when I was about, I was trying to remember now, it's so long ago,
Mm.
but I was around 20, I think, when I needed to see a doctor to understand what was going on because I wasn't having periods. I was still very sort of tall and lanky, and nothing was really happening in my body. So I was put on to a hormone replacement to get my periods started. So, but even then, back then, all that time ago, that it wasn't nothing was picked up. It was more just, I'm a late starter, or I just need a kickstart, to get going. And
Mm.
it wasn't until sort of throughout my adult life when taking these hormone replacements, female hormone replacements, was starting to play havoc with my body, in that it was
Mm.
starting to make me feel quite ill, and it was almost as though my body was rejecting. And so I was having a lot of pain, and my monthly cycles were really painful. And
Mm.
so then that sort of started a whole new investigation process. And it was through that process that they found that I was a little bit different on the inside. And it was during that time, 5 years ago, that I found out that I was actually what's known as a 46XY, and that I had the genetic blueprint of a male, which is absolutely
Mm.
fascinating.
Mm. Yeah. So what happened when you got your diagnosis? Did they decide to change your treatment, like your hormone therapy and stuff?
I found out about my genetic makeup after I'd had surgery, and
Right.
yeah,
Mm.
so I found that out then, and it was it was like pulling the rug out from under my feet when I found out, and when I understood what it actually meant. There was a lot of relief, because some of the confusion that I'd sort of felt inside when I was growing up around my identity
Mm.
suddenly fell into place. And so it was a
Mhm.
relief, in that point of view. But it was very hard as well, trying to understand and accept what was happening to me, and the fear of
Mm.
telling other people as well. It was
Yeah.
very difficult.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. So what led up to the surgery then? Why did that have to happen, and what did they suggest needed to happen?
I was having a lot of pain with my monthly
Yeah.
cycle,
Yeah. So it was due
basically.
to that, was it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was told at first that it was probably endometriosis, and that I needed
Mm.
to just go through. It's a very protracted process. So for women going through menstrual problems that are seeking medical support will understand, it's a protracted process. We don't really have a lot of say in what happens to our bodies as women, because I found it incredibly difficult to get to the bottom of what was going on with my body, because there was all sorts of hurdles to jump, such as, well, we're not going to do anything too drastic right now because you might want children, you might, all of these things that doctors like to say. We're not going to start tampering about with your body because you might want to fall pregnant next year. And I'm kind of like, no, that's not going to happen in my case. So anyway, I was having a lot of extreme pain. So the next step in the process was to put me on blocker injections, androgen blockers, to put me into a medical menopause. Right. And so I went into a medical menopause where basically hormonally my body just went to sleep, and the relief that my body felt from going on to these analog injections was quite a lifesaver for me, and the pain stopped, and I felt good for the first time in my adult life that I wasn't in pain, which was incredible.
Wow.
And and the doctors then said to me, okay, so we know then that because your body's gone into a menopause that you've probably got endometriosis. So, but we don't want to do anything right now because you might want children. And I'm like, no, I do not want children. I'm really quite adamant about that. I don't want them. And that's actually, it felt like a fight to try and explain, I don't want kids. Please just go in and remove what's causing, my problems. And I had finally had agreement to go ahead with having an investigation through just keyhole surgery for them to take a look. So they went in and had a look a few months down the line, and they'd found that I had a very, very small uterus, and that it was unusually small, and that they'd concluded that where they couldn't quite get to it, that it was either very sort of tilted. So if you imagine it, sort of, flop back on itself or something because it was small. And they couldn't find ovaries. So that then led on to the next stage, which happened sort of fairly soon afterwards. I say soon, it was about a year later. I went in to have a hysterectomy because what they'd found was this pain that I was having was bleeding outside of my uterus. I was bleeding into my abdominal cavity.
Yikes.
Yeah, and that was causing a lot of pain. So I went in to have the surgery and consented for just a hysterectomy. And then when I woke up from the surgery, I woke up I'd been in that surgery for around 8 hours, and the surgery is only supposed to take 45 minutes or thereabouts. So it's quite quick these days. I know.
Yeah.
And with what happened during that time is, that's kind of another story. What I found out was going on. But I woke up and I was told that they had removed my uterus, which was underdeveloped. It was very small, and they couldn't find ovaries, but they'd found very underdeveloped testes, which just weren't fully developed at all. And the structure of what they'd found wasn't what we would ordinarily see on anatomy charts. Yeah, and then whilst they were in there, so they removed those. So bearing in mind, I'd only consented to have my uterus removed. So they removed my cervix. They'd removed my, what do we want to call them? My gonads. So those were removed, and they had also done some alteration work. So they moved my urethra, to exit from a different place in my anatomy
Whoa.
as well. I didn't ask for
Why?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Why?
working fine.
It wasn't
And
broken. Yeah.
no, it wasn't
Yeah.
broken.
Yeah.
So that was moved, and also my vaginal canal was stretched, and it was lengthened with a section of my sigmoid colon was because
Wow.
that's my understanding is it's quite robust and stretchy. So they took a section of that to make the canal longer so that I could have enjoyable sex with a man.
Mm. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
Wow.
exactly. So, and this is the one of the main issues with the intersex
Mm.
community
Wow.
is surgery that we haven't consented to. So, what
Mm-hmm.
should have been a removal of my uterus turned into a whole lot of other things that I hadn't consented to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd heard that, and that was one of the reasons why the surgery took so long. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I'd heard at the same time from a couple of members of staff that weren't too happy with what went on in the operating theatre was the number of people that were in there having a look
Right.
because it was unusual. And
Mm.
so there was lots of people going in taking photographs, and
Yikes.
which again wasn't consented to as well.
Mm. Yeah,
So
that sounds rather invasive and basically like intersex genital mutilation, doesn't it? It's
yes,
like
a little
it
bit.
doesn't just happen at birth, right? To be fair.
Yeah, and especially in the UK, and I don't know how this happens in other countries, is when we sign a consent form, there's a disclaimer on that consent form saying that you give the surgeon your consent to perform anything that they deem necessary.
Yeah, so it's
So
a very
once,
almost a personal decision on their part, like
yes,
influenced, I guess, by their own ideas of what things should be like. Because especially what you said about like extending the vaginal canal,
mm,
it's all about this. I don't know. It's very I find it almost sounds like misogynistic because it's
yeah,
like it's all about the fuckability is
mm,
important, right?
yeah,
That's very important. So let's prioritize that. So
mm.
it's very, very infuriating, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
where I was assigned female at birth, and had my mum said, "Actually, I want a boy," had I been assigned a boy at birth, I think my trajectory through life would have been different. But
Mm.
where I was assigned female at birth, exactly to your point that because I've been assigned female, that when I didn't go through puberty, I was given feminizing hormones when I was in the operating theatre. There's this view from the surgeon, right? We must, extend this canal, make it better for sex, and to do all these misogynistic
Mm.
things.
Yeah, and
Um,
reinforcing the whole binary thing, isn't it?
exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm. So
Mm.
interestingly, what you just said about if they'd had performed surgery at birth, your life would have looked very differently, of course. But also, I think if they had realised sooner that what
Mm.
was going on with you was being intersex, then they could have obviously treated you differently as well. Because I think if you have obviously the gonads and those organs, they make hormones, don't they? So the
Yes.
ovaries make, well, they make all sorts of hormones and stuff, but I guess the ovaries make more estrogen and the testicles, the testes, make more testosterone.
Mm.
So you would have probably had your fuel was like your hormonal fuel in a way would have been testosterone rather than estrogen because you did not have ovaries, right?
Yeah.
And even though the testes were underdeveloped, they still would have produced some testosterone, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. That's absolutely correct.
You
And
know.
when I was working with the medical teams to try and understand exactly what variation of intersex I had, it
Mm.
aligns more closely with what's called, so it's 46XY gonadal dysgenesis, but it's not an exact alignment. And had had they removed that at birth, it would have given me trouble with hormone regulation. I understand today that I just didn't have the oomph in my sex glands to make me, fully female or fully male.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened that was wrong in the surgery as an adult that I hadn't consented to was that they'd removed healthy sex glands because they thought they would be cancerous or they could become cancerous. And that's another challenge, again, in the intersex community, is removal of gonads or testes for fear of cancer. And I don't know any numbers around this, but I'm yet to see individuals that have had cancer because of leaving these organs in situ. So, and I don't believe there's been enough study on that, and I think it's a bit of a myth, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the stats on that either, but like I know Sarah, who was in episode 5, same story. Also, recommended to have the internal testes removed. Yeah. Well, there you go. So how, I mean, how are things? How are things right now? Do you feel like you found a balance after all that? That sounds like a lot to deal with, but like, have you found some sort of balance again with like, your health and your hormones and your overall well-being?
Yeah, I think so. It took a long time for my mental health to right itself after that shock, and it was something that I felt alone going through that and not talking about it. The conversation in the hospital was, you might want to just kind of keep this to yourself. It's not
Wow.
really, it's not understood. And I did feel quite alone with it. I thought I was the only one, to be honest, and
Yeah.
that was hard. So my mental health took a long time to find its own balance. I continued after I came out of the hospital. I continued to take female hormones, and I still it still didn't sit right with me and with my body. It's almost as though my body just wants to reject them. And I took a decision about a year ago just to stop, no hormones, and I just wanted to see what my body does from here on, so that I can make, finally, at my age, I can make a decision about my own body. And this is a really big step for me coming up, over the next, I have to give it another year perhaps, and see, what do I want to do as I go into, my golden years as an adult. Where do I want to go with regards to, what hormones I take? Because I recognize that at my age, I am going to need to take some hormones for my bone health and just for general well-being.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm in a good place. I've done lots of work, lots of reflection on my gender, how I feel about myself, and also looking at what I can do to start to raise some awareness around being intersex and what that potential role would look like for me. Because I'm not, I'm an advocate, but I'm not a very public advocate for being intersex, because I'm not out. And I think if I can't, I'm not out in my own family and my own sort of community that's around me, that stepping up is probably a bit too much right now.
Yeah.
So but it's good, I feel really good, I suddenly have peace that I didn't have when I was a child growing up.
That's good. Yeah.
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 So in the past year, would you say, what have you noticed since kind of stopping the hormones? And obviously, the journey as it goes on, as you age, is a different one, isn't it? So you'll have to figure that out as you go, I guess, as
Yeah.
kind of we all do in a way. But
Yes.
yeah, so I mean, what has the past year been like since you stopped the hormones altogether? Because it sounds like maybe from the biology you've described, that there was always maybe a very low production of it, and that's just what you're used to. That's just what your body is used to. Yeah?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because when we lose our testicles or our ovaries or gonads, that our body produces hormones through other glands.
Mhm.
So the adrenal gland, for example, produces testosterone. And one of the changes that I've noticed in the last year since coming off HRT is that my testosterone levels are quite high. So I know that they're
Right.
high. They're not as
Yeah.
they're not as high as they need to be, but they're higher than, say, a woman that's going through the menopause,
Mhm.
or someone that's going through the menopause. I just want to be careful I
Mm.
get my language right here, but
Yeah.
for a person that's going through menopause, but then
Mhm.
again, you get male and female menopause, so I'm probably confusing confusing everything
Yeah.
here. But I've lost my train of
Yeah.
thought now. But so some of the things that I have noticed, physical changes, is that my fat around my body. So I have a very male skeleton. I'm very tall, which is it's kind of typical for people that have my variation of intersex. But
Mhm.
I've noticed that my body fat is starting to shift around, and I'm becoming a lot
Mm.
stronger, which is great.
Interesting.
Really pleased with
Yeah.
that. It could always do with
Yeah.
extra muscles. I've noticed that my voice is starting to change. It's dropped a few notes, which
Mm.
I can tell, which has been a little bit strange, because I do a lot of video work, and I've always been quite conscious of
Mm.
my changes in my voice. Is a bit croaky at times. And yeah, so body hair as well. I'm starting to develop a lot of body hair all over. So
Mm. Mhm.
I'm turning into a little monkey at the moment. But,
Uh,
so that's
yeah.
it's been interesting.
Mm.
Just to
Mhm.
see how the body changes,
Yeah.
and how amazing the human body really is.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
it's incredible when you think about it, that when we're all in the womb in the early couple of months of our development, that we all develop as female.
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't
Fetal
that incredible?
development is like it's just like it's like magic, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It really is. And then because I learning about this process of, well,
Mm.
what happened to me? How did this happen? You know,
Mm.
did how did I get this? And what I understood throughout that process of fetal development is that at a certain point, some of us have, so we'll have an X chromosome. And if you have an extra X chromosome, you develop as biologically female. If you
Mhm.
have a Y chromosome, you're biologically or genetically male. So my Y chromosome was faulty, and it just didn't develop down that trajectory to become fully biologically male. So hence my sort of developing in the grey, as it were,
Mm.
in between. So
Mhm.
that's absolutely fascinating. But
Yeah.
I'm
Wow.
a massive advocate for women, and because I've been raised as female, massive advocate for women stepping into their power,
Mhm.
and when I learned that we all begin life as female in the womb, that was,
Mhm.
I just thought, yes, that is incredible, really incredible.
Yeah, kind of suck that, Adam and Eve, right?
Yeah, I know, right? We were there, women are there first.
Yeah, yeah. And now I've just offended all the religious listeners.
Yes.
Oh dear. Okay, yeah. So another thing I was going to ask you about actually. So the label trans does
Mm.
resonate with you as well. So where does that all fit in for you?
So that fits in for me because where I was assigned female at birth, that I question whether I am female, whether I identify as female. And again, that's another part of a journey that I'm still very much on. However, it is quite interesting because some intersex people would say that they don't identify as a trans person
Mm,
because when an intersex person, so for myself, for example, if where I am genetically male, if I was to say, I am a man, that I'm not trans because I am a man genetically. So I'm talking
mm,
about genetics here because I know I
mm,
understand that if a trans man or a trans woman, they are a man or they are a woman. But when I'm talking about myself in terms of an intersex person,
mm,
that if I'm emancipating my gender identity, reclaiming what I was born with,
mm,
then I would be male without being trans. So there is that I'm working through. But yeah, I
mm,
call myself a trans person. I'm non-binary,
mhm.
which I'm very comfortable walking in the grey, that I don't feel male and I don't feel female, but at the same time, I'm both.
Yeah. So that's where the bigender comes in,
Yeah,
would
that's
you
where the
say?
bigender
Yeah.
comes in.
Yeah.
And I hadn't, and this was something that until I started doing the work on understanding gender identity, I'd always been quite happy, well, this is me. But when I started doing the work and really thinking about it, and I would highly recommend anybody listening to do some identity work and really to work out, who am I? Because it's opened up for me stereotypes that I've had about male and female, and those attributes that we put onto those identities. And I've learned so much more about. So I would call myself demiboy because I think I'm more masculine than I am feminine, and I've done a lot of work around sort of understanding that. And I've also spent a lot of time trying to understand who I am by working out what I'm not. And
Mm.
that's things such as I was asked to get into a hot tub last summer and I had to wear a bikini for it, and that set off quite a lot of. I had a bit of a panic attack around the
Wow.
fear of putting a bikini on because that's not something I'd ordinarily wear.
Mm.
And it's through times like that help us to understand a little bit more, to piece together that jigsaw puzzle of who we are as individuals, that
Mhm.
it started to dawn on me when I actually looked at how I present myself, that I don't wear what would be considered to be very feminine clothing. So I'm very
Mm.
sort of androgynous with what I wear. And
Mhm.
so other people's perceptions of what they think I should be wearing to hot tub parties and and to events and things like that. Or my mum would say, "Oh, you're going to wear a dress," and I'm like, "No, that's not going to happen." and but
Yeah.
it's other people that, yeah, they have views on what you should be wearing, the colors that you should be wearing, and that. And so it was when I did the work and I actually kind of sat and thought about where my sort of feelings were coming from, that I was able to better understand myself, which,
Yeah.
it's been eye-opening. It really has.
I'll bet. Yeah. I think it is, like you say, it's good to ask yourself identity questions, and even, gender related, but I think it can be really scary for people for some reason, because of doing this podcast, I suppose, I started questioning gender as a concept, as a construct. And then I thought, oh no, I'm not questioning mine. I'm just sort of questioning gender in general. And then I was like, okay, can you actually do one without the other? Possibly not. So now I'm like, okay, so how does this work, and who am I? Like, I feel like I'm on this journey and figuring it out, like questioning, I guess. So yeah. But it's not like I don't feel like it's undermining my identity. I'm just like curious, like, ooh, what is this? And just digging into this construct of gender and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So
and curiosity is, it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? And I think so many people, especially perhaps those that are narrow-minded, or those that are quite happy with with how they were assigned at birth, and they live in that assignment quite happily, that curiosity is a beautiful thing. And I would say for even those people that are quite happy with who they are, is to just explore. And because I think there's nothing more beautiful, more empowering than becoming self-aware and really understanding who you are, because it helps you to understand other people. So,
yeah, it works together, doesn't it? And it's like, it's just great to become more of you, just more of you. Yeah. I love that.
Definitely.
Yeah. So as for sexual orientation, that's an interesting one, because like, if you're playing with all these labels for your identity, like, how do you then label your sexual orientation or your attractions and stuff like that? I mean, not that you have to necessarily, but like, how does that look for you?
It is confusing. And I've started confusing myself when I'll tell you what set it off was, so a mutual friend of ours showed me the gender bread diagram. That's what started my work off on, on who I am. And I looked at that and I thought, oh, my gender identity, sexual orientation, my biological makeup, they're all different things. And I hadn't really realized that before.
Yeah.
And when I looked at sexual orientation versus these other variables that we have that make up who we are, I thought to myself, well, I am biologically, mixed as an intersex person. I'm genetically male. I like women. And what does that make my sexual orientation? Because when I was living, before I knew that I was intersex, I would have called myself a lesbian. And it made me question, well, if I'm doing work on my gender identity, and if I don't fully see myself as a woman, then am I a lesbian? Because the definition of a lesbian is a woman who likes other women. So if I wasn't a lesbian, what am I? And it's a hard one. Would I be heterosexual if I was a demiboy gender who liked women? And I don't know the answer to that. All I know is that I like my sexual orientation is women. But it's a hard one, because people, when you're dating, they want to know those things as part of getting to know you. And we like to work out whether we're a good fit with the right people. So understanding these things is important, but I really can't answer that question. I don't know the answer to it, and maybe I won't.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, totally. There is a word that came to mind, sapphic, I guess. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't.
I think it just means, I should probably have looked this up. I think it just means female attracted, I think.
Oh, I
But I
see.
will make sure I look it up after our conversation. So in a way, like, yeah, it's just the label of who you're attracted to rather than
Mm,
linking it to a label that defines who you are. So like a lesbian would indicate who you are as well as who you're attracted to. But
yeah.
I think sapphic might be more of a term that just relates to who you're attracted to. I think. So this is an interesting realization as well. I don't know if I got that right, but
We'll find
that's
out
what
later.
my brain is. Yeah, this we'll find out later. That's what my brain is telling me right now. So, what would you say, or what would you like to add when it comes to, telling people about intersex people and how to be better allies and, debunking some myths and things like that?
Yeah, there's so many things that we can do to be inclusive and supportive of others. And I think
Mm.
the first one is that, we exist. There's a widespread understanding that, that it is just the binary, that there are male and female genders, and that understanding is confused. So gender identity and biological sex are seen by many as just the same thing,
Yeah.
and those intersex people don't exist because it's not talked about widely enough. And there's more and more people nowadays that are starting to talk about being intersex, which is, it's amazing, it's brilliant, and the work that the intersex advocates are doing is fantastic. So I would
Hmm.
say, to be a great ally is to start to find out about us. And there's new resources coming up on the internet that you can check out, and some of the intersex advocates that are out there, they're great people to follow. And so getting educated is one of the main ones. And I think also, where I touched on biological sex and gender identity, is to really start to, appreciate that they're two different things,
Hmm.
because that's really important when,
Mm.
you are getting to know an intersex person as well. That, that's really important. And I think being more inclusive in the way that, or using inclusive language when we are asking someone's sex. So, for example, if you're running a business, I, it happens to me all the time that you've got two boxes to tick, male or female, and
I know. Good
that
grief.
can be
Every time I
really
see that, I message them and go, can
cringe.
you just, you know,
Yeah, and
yeah.
even as a, non-binary people out there, and it affects so many people, that not just intersex people.
Mm.
So to use inclusive language where you can. And also, so the intersex community are currently at the moment included in the LGBT plus wider community.
Hmm.
But it's good to understand that intersex people don't necessarily identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. So it's good to understand that we're included within the community, but not all people, not all intersex people are trans, for example. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a matter of like, you can be one or several of the LGBTQ alphabet soup.
yes.
Yeah. And it's different for everyone. Yeah. You might just be one, you might be more. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, so not all intersex people are trans, and
Mm.
not all trans people are intersex
Mm.
as well. And that's another important one, because where we're learning about trans people, and where also trans people are learning about themselves as well, is, I've had, a couple of wonderful trans people say to me, I think I'm going to identify as intersex.
Mm.
And it's very important that this is why it's so important to educate, is because there's an emerging sort of misunderstanding that if your internal biology doesn't match your external biology, that you're intersex. But the classification for intersex is from birth. We were born this way, that so that a trans person is not intersex where there's been a surgical intervention. Does that make sense? I don't know if I've explained that very well.
That does make sense. Yeah. So, I mean, intersex is a fact rather than something you can choose to identify as. It's like I don't know if you can call it a biological fact as such. I don't know if those are the right words, because I don't know. Like, I'm really conscious of the language I use as well. I'm like, oh my God, have I said it wrong? Oh no. Like, am I going to get, beaten up?
I'm sure though that your listeners are very forgiving. We're all learning, we're all making, all learning and making mistakes and learning from those.
It's true, yeah. But it makes sense to me, and I hadn't honestly considered it before, because to me it was kind of obvious, but I can appreciate why it might not be. And what another thing I was thinking about as well, it's like, for example, two-spirit individuals in like indigenous American cultures. Some people have maybe said, "Oh, identify as two-spirit," and I'm like, no, unless you are a Native American person. That is not something you can identify as. That is a traditional cultural thing, and that's not a label you can just adopt. So it's important, very important, I think, to learn the difference between, it's not, I don't want to gatekeep and say, oh, you can identify as this but not as that. Like, that's not up to me, obviously, but it's just good to just educate yourself.
It totally basically is, Esther. And I was having a conversation online because I belong in a private intersex community online, which has been an amazing safe space. And it's been brilliant. And we were discussing that one of the members of that community had said that they'd had a conversation with a non-binary person that had said they wanted to make their genitalia more intersex. And so we were discussing that in the community, and we came to the conclusion that we would go back to the outside world and just kind of answer questions like that in terms of, if you were asked that by somebody, I'm going to make my genitalia more intersex or more ambiguous, that for intersex people, they've had a journey, and in most cases not a very happy journey, of various prejudices, difficulties with surgery, being accepted. Dating is difficult, and all this, there's been so many things as part of that journey of an intersex person, that for someone to come and say, oh, I'm just going to make my genitalia look ambiguous, that's something that we need to be very careful when we are sort of glossing over the journey potentially that an intersex person has had through life. So
that makes a lot of sense. Wow.
And I think one of the most important takeaways, I think, if anyone listening, doesn't take away anything else from this conversation, if we haven't offended everybody already with language or lack of correctness.
I know. I feel like, should I cut this? Should I cut that? Oh dear.
I think that one of the most important things is the medical profession. They label the intersex as a disorder or a syndrome, or a disorder of sex development. And as a community, obviously I don't speak for the intersex community, I speak for myself, but we generally use words such as, so you heard me say my variation of intersex. So it's a variation rather than disorder. because that's important, because we're human and we're real people.
Totally. Yeah. I've heard the word difference used as well, rather than disorder. Difference in sexual development. Yeah, I thought that was definitely a better term as well.
Yes,
so,
absolutely,
and variations.
But there's there's a lot we can do to be an ally and to be a friend to intersex people, and I think to approach, if you meet someone who tells you that they're intersex, is it's just to, all those questions that you want to ask that you shouldn't ask, is to try and put those aside, like well, what's in your pants and things like that.
So write them down and Google it, right?
Write it down, Google it. But with that individual that has opened up to you, is to be a friend and to listen. And when they want to share, then that's the time that they'll share, and maybe you can ask questions.
And I think it just takes some, like, if you're friends, like close friends, you might talk about that kind of stuff. But like asking a perfect stranger, because in a way, I get the enthusiasm in some people, like, oh my God, that is so interesting. So how does this work? How does that work? And that's a genuine curiosity. And that's not a bad thing. But still, there is a level of discretion involved as to what to ask a person. Like if you think, okay, would I like someone asking me that question? What's in your pants? Well, you're like, okay, hang on, buy me dinner first at least, okay, joking aside. But it's like, no, just no, basically. Yeah.
I mean, I'm blessed in that the close friends that I have shared this with, and I mean that was a big thing to share with them, because I'd already known them for a couple of years and then came out. And even then, they're so wonderful in that, and I wouldn't mind if they asked me questions, because I love them. But they wait until I'm ready to talk about things, and that's that's really beautiful too. So
that's fair.
I hugely appreciate that as an intersex person. But
wow, that was
a lot
so
there.
insightful. Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, I learned a lot. Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered yet, or do you feel like?
Oh, do you know what? We could talk all day.
Totally.
Talk all day on this, but no, I don't think so. So.
Yeah, we've covered quite a bit. Wow.
We certainly have. And I think if anybody listening to this episode who is intersex, wants to reach out, if you're feeling alone, I don't want anybody else to feel the way that I felt. I just felt completely on my own. So if you're intersex and you want to reach out, then contact Esther on the podcast. I'm sure you'll have contact details, won't you, on the on the website.
Yeah, that's right.
Or to to reach out to some of the incredible support communities and organisations that are out there. Just don't go through this alone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. It's been good to be here.
Yay. You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/LOR, which is LOR, where you can also read the transcript. If you'd like to connect with LOR, please let us know and we can put you in touch. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com, on social media and on YouTube. Again, if you'd like to support us, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender or buy us a coffee. Links are on the website. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded. Yeah. By the way, when I said I was worried about what to cut out, I was talking about what I said, not what you said. It's like, oh God, what have I said?
You might end up with a podcast that's like 5 minutes long or something.
snapshot, like a snippet, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Just the outtakes.
I know. So the podcast episode will be 5 minutes and the outtakes will be like 45 minutes. Oh my goodness.